Sorry, you guys. I apologize. Let me try this one more time. I'm like, why is there no camera?
Strip out qualified.
Let's try this again. I apologize.
And then we can do one of two
things. This is a Senate hearing live. This is a
live
live Senate hearing. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for letting me know those signs.
But Mr. Mayor, as you said, there's going to be a flood of cases.
It's important that we hear this case.
Have kept out of the courtrooms. And right now, indemnification of officers stands on a fairly
Okay, I'm having fun with StreamYard. Can you guys see me? Can you hear me? Let's try this. Put BF1, PF1. Good afternoon. This is Shirley Husar. I'll go back and re-edit it and get it to this point. We are having some technical difficulties. There is a live hearing right now before the Senate regarding police brutality, and I wanted you to hear it. So hopefully you guys are able to hear me, and let's go right into it because I don't want to waste any more time. Hold on. I'm at the. Let me find it again. Jesus Lord. Oh, I know where I put that. I put it on my Facebook. Hold on. Hope you guys, thank you for chiming in. Thank you for letting me know you had no sound because I'm going back and forth. I know we don't have this much technical difficulties, and this is really important at this hearing and that we hear what's going on because there is so much happening in the world today that we are not discussing. And so I want to make sure that we hear a different perspective so that we can discuss these cross-examinations of the Black community going on. So again, there's a Senate hearing as we speak right now that's live. So I wanted to
from that experience, what are the pieces that stick out to you as being the most significant, that made the most impact, that really moved the ball forward the most?
I think it was the community policing where those conversations and those relationships were developed, where they were visible and active. So that community policing was a big deal. And second was hearing from the residents and from multiple groups, particularly the pastors and different ones. And Mayor Red did good to pull in as many as she could in her time. So that relational community aspect was really a beautiful element that helped greatly.
Very, very good. Can I ask about something else you said in your written testimony? You talk about the flaws of asking police to fix upstream problems, your words. Could you just talk to us a little bit about your experience as a pastor, what you mean by upstream problems, and just maybe tell us more what you mean about that? Because I think that seems like a significant point you're making there.
Well, it's been said here on this committee that a police officer is given a task of social worker on the second decision making. And yes, it's difficult. He's social worker, he's fixing, he's dealing, he's trying to administer mercy, he's trying to do so much. And I want to give credit to those officers who navigate that. But my colleague, Mr. Merritt, has told us that we failed miserably and we kill a lot of people in America through police, and other countries haven't. So when if my plumbing backs up, I'm not going to call an electrician because he's probably going to mess up my plumbing. So when we put plumbing problems on electricians, they mess up your plumbing. And so when we put so much on police, and that's why the system is messed up, because they shouldn't have to do that. And so the upstream problem it's difficult navigating and almost unfair. That's why we talk about the brokenness of the system.
Okay, last question, Mr. Chairman. Pastor, can you just give us an example? Give us an example of what you think of an upstream problem, a plumbing problem that we're calling an electrician for, just to help us get our hands around it.
I'll use a negative. Mr. Brooks in Atlanta, the officer showed up to ask him to talk with him. I felt that they were applying not just justice, but mercy. He was saying I could just walk home. And so now they're navigating a few areas. Are they supposed to do justice and lock him up? Are they supposed to do mercy and honor and say, look, I'm asleep, I can go home? And so in light of that is so much to juggle and handle. Yeah, I'm a little emotional. I saw that video and it's been messing with my head, even sitting here. But yeah, I think we give too much to do for our officers and we don't train them properly. I think we need to parse this out and restructure completely because we need comprehensive change and radical intervention.
Thanks.
Senator, if I may add to that question.
You bet. Absolutely.
What we're finding out is that no amount of law enforcement, no amount of use of force can secure a community that's stuck in poverty. Now, to tell us we can't be the social workers, we can't be the mental and chemical health therapists, we can't be the housing counselors and all these other things. They're telling us what our community needs from their perspective on the ground. And so if we can find, as I alluded to earlier, again, $200 billion a year to public police prisons, we can never find the resources to raise the minimum wage, to through the Section 8 waiting list, and to provide those social workers and all of those other things that are actually telling us what we need. Well, then those are some of the upstream problems that officers are constantly trying to tell us that we need to address. That's why we're putting social workers in their call to connect people to stability, to support, to solutions, instead of just creating a deeper crisis when we find people who are in crisis.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think I'll lead off with that, and I appreciate Mr. Logan's words and his emotion, because I think we're all feeling that. Mayor Carter, it was hard to hear parts of your story, but just so my colleagues can hear it, you were talking about how your grandpa, Melvin Sr., worked at that railroad in Minnesota, and how he was called George. In fact, all the porters were called George, so that the white passengers only had to hear one name. And then out of that, and learn one name, your dad becomes one of the first African-American police officers in the city of St. Paul. And you talked about how you thought about your dad, and I know still do, and the people around him, the officers he knew as superheroes. And I guess my question is how you talk to those police officers now, some of whom you knew growing up, about why it is so important to have this systemic change with policing, from your personal experience.
Senator, thank you for the question, and I think that's really important to know. Our officers are just as disgusted by the video of George Floyd's murder. I had one officer recently say to me, I signed up for this job, but the notion that I can be hurt because someone's upset about something some other officer did in some other jurisdiction, that makes me frustrated. And so we are connected with our officers, and they know that those instances don't serve them well. They don't want to serve next to those officers, and they're frustrated, and not. Actually, all of our children deserve to be able to look at our officers as those superheroes in the way that I did. That's one of the reasons why it's so important that as we constantly integrate our officers into our community, that we're working. We have established under Chief Axel, our police chief, we significantly grown our community engagement division in our police department. We established those initiatives that I mentioned to ensure that we're providing pathways for youth who grow up in our city, go to our public schools to become officers and to serve the city both as officers, as paramedics, as teams, as firefighters. That is critical. They're out at our community, as you are, you're seeing them sector. They're out at our communities, they're engaging with people on a direct basis, so that they're only engaging with people isn't just there's something wrong and I'm here to arrest you. We talk to our officers all the time about that. It's a part of our training, it's a part of our mission. Our chief always asks folks as we talk, as we go about the work, in the words of our chief, putting deposits into our bank of trust before we ever have to make a call.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to ask Ms. Gupta a question, but I'll have you follow up on the record. I know Senator Graham was asking you about other police departments, or you were responding to his question about Minneapolis, and I think you were trying to make the point that this is happening all over the country, and it's not just in one department. So I want to give you a chance on the record later to answer that, but I'm going to turn my remaining time to Ms. Gupta. And I think you know, Ms. Gupta, that I led a letter with about 26 senators asking for a pattern and practice investigation from Attorney General Barr of the Minneapolis Police Department. And do you think that such a pattern and practice investigation is needed?
Yes, I do.
And I don't know if you're aware, but right before this hearing started, we've done 2 letters now, a group of us. I got a response, and it was from Mr. Boyd, the Assistant Attorney General, and they did not commit to doing this investigation. They said the section may initiate a civil action in the name of the United States and seek appropriate injunctive relief. We will carefully consider the evidence in this case, as well as any additional information that comes to our attention. Do you think there is enough information now out there that the whole world has seen to embark on this investigation?
I think the years of systemic problems in the Minneapolis Police Department, coupled with, of course, George Floyd's most recent killing of Mr. Floyd and other police misconduct in Minneapolis by the police department would merit a pattern and practice investigation. There's a pretty abundant amount of evidence.
And I also know that some of the consent decrees, when you led the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, we actually required police departments to ban the use of chokeholds and other neck restraints. Is that right?
That's right.
So that's one of the examples of something that could come out of a consent decree that was a result of a pattern and practice investigation.
Yes.
And then in our state now, because we have not been able to have that Justice Department pattern and practice investigation, in addition to Attorney General's investigation, Attorney General Ellison of the case and his prosecution of the case, we now have our Minnesota Department of Human Rights stepping in to look at the department. And Senator Harris was talking about the importance of having outside investigations, which I strongly supported when I was a prosecutor. We had some issues, as you may know, with the Minneapolis police trying to take those investigations in-house. But in addition to that, states, especially now, if the Justice Department isn't doing pattern and practice, could step in to actually oversee these investigations, but as well as oversee a similar version of a pattern and practice. Could you address that?
Yeah, I mean, I think both, just to get to your earlier point about chokeholds, consent decrees covered in many instances bans on chokeholds. They are not a substitute for national legislation on this issue, because otherwise it's just kind of jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and the Justice Department, even when functioning according to its mandate, can't meet all of that. So national legislation is required. And then on this other point, on state AGs and other independent offices being able to do these investigations, it's really important that there are prosecutors and state AG's offices that are empowered to be able to take these issues on. They are going to have more trust than local DA's offices. It's just the nature of this, given the close relationship between district attorneys' offices and police departments. And so while I want the Civil Rights Division at the U.S. Justice Department that is filled with expertise to be fully funded and resourced and be given the authority that it needs to have, it is also really important to be able to equip state attorneys general and independent offices to do this as well.
Thank you very much.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for convening this hearing. Thank you for each of the witnesses for coming. You know, this is a time when our country is torn apart, is filled with anger, is filled with rage, is filled with division. And it is my hope that through this, we can find ways to come together on shared principles. Here's one proposition I believe everyone in this hearing room agrees with. What happened to George Floyd was horrific. It was unconscionable. It was clearly a grotesque abuse of police power, and the officers that carried it out are rightly being prosecuted. To the best of my knowledge, every witness here today agrees with those statements, and every senator on this committee agrees with those statements. I think all of us, regardless of party, should demand justice and should demand that the law be applied fairly.
You were just watching the Senate Judiciary Committee's hearing on policing and community relations. You can keep streaming it at cbsnews.com/hearing. For now, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more on the hearing on Red and Blue.
In 60 years, we went from about 100,000 factory workers to probably about 7,000.
Off in the distance, you can see some factories that are still humming. And most of them are just kind of abandoned.
The restaurant industry.
This
Okay,
is
so they're gonna have
abusing
to,
lethal force while in custody. The time has come to create a system to combat a broken system. Is policing in America systematically a racist enterprise?
Of course it is.
I'd like to think not, because I do believe most cops are far more good than bad. But when every black man in America believes that getting stopped by the cops is a traumatic experience, something happened somehow, somewhere. And I'd like to have a systematic approach to problems that continue to happen over and over again. So there are a lot of ideas coming from different corners of the political spectrum. The question for the committee: is it possible to find common ground? The answer is obviously yes, if we want to. As chairman, I would like to. Senator Feinstein.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. And thanks for holding this hearing today. It really is important. On May 25th, a Minneapolis police officer knelt on the neck of George Floyd for almost 9 minutes. Mr. Floyd repeatedly said, "I can't breathe." Bystanders begged the officer to stop, but he continued to choke Mr. Floyd until his body went limp, his life extinguished. Now, what was the unforgivable crime that led an officer to kill this unarmed 46-year-old black man? He was suspected of using a counterfeit $20 bill to buy groceries during a global pandemic. Personally, this is beyond anything I can imagine, and I hope it is beyond anything you can imagine. George Floyd isn't the first unarmed black man or woman to be killed by police. The names are etched into this country's consciousness. Breonna Taylor, an emergency medical worker, shot 8 times by Louisville, Kentucky police while asleep in her home. Eric Garner, choked to death by an NYPD officer for selling cigarettes. Freddie Gray, killed after being taken into custody by Baltimore police for possessing a knife. Walter Scott, shot in the back by North Charleston police after being stopped for a bad brake light. Stephon Clark, killed by Sacramento police in his grandmother's backyard for breaking windows. And Michael Brown, shot 6 times by Ferguson police while his hands were raised in the air. And just last weekend, the Atlanta police were called to respond to reports of a young man asleep in his car and blocking a fast food restaurant's drive-through. Even though the young man moved his car to a nearby space when asked by the police, the encounter ended when Rayshard Brooks was shot in the back twice as he ran away. I don't know how anyone can read these stories or see the videos and not conclude that something is radically wrong in this country. And we've got to move to stop this epidemic of deadly force against Black Americans. I remember well the call to action in 2014 after Michael Brown was shot in Ferguson, Missouri. President Obama convened a task force on 21st century policing. That task force provided a roadmap to reform law enforcement. Unfortunately, though, the task force recommendations have not been followed, and instead we have been largely abandoned under President Trump's watch. For example, on August 2017, the Trump administration lifted President Obama's ban on the transfer of certain military equipment to police departments.
Okay, now this is not live anymore, so I'm going to stop in between. This is the same lady who has been in office for 40 years, who have allowed police brutality in the state of California, who has allowed illegal immigrants, who has allowed coercing and collusions that we've learned about through LAPD and MS-13s and gang members. This is the same lady that is now pivoting to President Trump. Now, understand the situation that's going on with George Floyd. This didn't just happen. This has happened under these people's watch. I don't care what party you're with. These are poor legislators who have ran our country into the ground. And as Dave Chappelle stated, the streets are talking and they're showing and they're telling, and you're going to have to do something.
That ban was put in place by President Obama, consistent with the task force's finding that the use of military-style weapons and riot gear escalated tensions between police and the communities they serve. The Trump administration has similarly abandoned the use of pattern or practice investigations to identify and remedy systemic problems within police departments. Congress gave the Department of Justice authority to conduct pattern or practice investigations following the horrific police beating of Rodney King in my home state, California. And since then, most administrations have really used that tool effectively. The Obama administration, for example, opened 25 investigations into possible illegal patterns and practices within law enforcement agencies. Several of these investigations resulted actually in consent decrees that set out specific reforms designed to shift police culture and end systemic problems.
Did it end? Did it end? Because if it had ended, Ms. Feinstein, if it had ended, this man would not be dead today. But you're talking about California. You're talking about California. This man wouldn't kill California. But we all know the police got their own underground code.
Now, by contrast, according to public reporting, the Trump administration has opened just one narrow pattern and practice investigation that focuses on a single unit of the Springfield Police Department in Massachusetts. Remarkably, in the wake of George Floyd's death, Attorney General Barr has refused to open a pattern and practice investigation into the Minneapolis Police Department. How can that be? Anyone who has seen the video of George Floyd's last 9 minutes of life has seen that none of the officers at the scene objected or intervened to help a man who was pleading for his life. And I think the video shows the truth in that. So enough is enough. Last week, Senator Booker and Harris introduced the Justice in Police Act. That's a bill that would implement many of the recommendations of the task force on 21st century policing, and it would require real accountability for police use of force. I want to commend them and thank them. And Mr. Chairman, I hope this committee will take that bill seriously. We can hold hearings, we can process it, and perhaps we can make some progress. This isn't a simple bill. It's quite comprehensive. It addresses tough issues and it makes notable changes. Let me just list a couple. It bans the use of chokeholds or carotid holds by law enforcement officers. It prohibits the use of racial profiling by police officers. In other words, ending police targeting of individuals for criminal investigation based on their race, ethnicity, or national origin. Long overdue. It creates a police misconduct registry that would collect the disciplinary of termination history of officers so that potential employers would be aware of an officer's past misconduct. It gives subpoena authority to the Justice Department to conduct these pattern or practice investigations, which would ensure that investigators could obtain all the information they need to conduct thorough investigations of systemic police misconduct. Also eliminates the defense of qualified immunity so that police officers are held accountable for misconduct. These are difficult issues, but they must be addressed. And I really want to congratulate both of my colleagues for putting this bill together and bringing it to us.
I'm gonna pause for a second. Do you notice how wonderful they love to toot their own horn? Look, we put a bill together. Do you know why? I'm gonna tell you why, Senator Feinstein. It's because the streets have spoken. People are dying. George Floyd was one death. And the people are dying and they're tired. And guess what? White people are now dying. White Karens are acting abruptly more exposed than ever. Karens, you know why? Because Karens have got our people killed. Karen has had people where there was a Karen who called on a black lady who was pregnant and the police forcefully threw that girl to the ground because of Karen. So you act like you're doing something, like you're doing your job. You needed to do your job. Hold on. It's Jesse. Let's go ahead.
Meaningful reform is long overdue, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to our careful evaluation of this bill over the coming weeks. So thank you, Senator Booker and Harris, as well as Representatives Bass and Nadler, for your leadership on this issue. Mr. Chairman, you and I spoke in the days after George Floyd's killing. I remember your saying that his death was horrific. That's actually the word you used, and said both of us were appalled at what we saw, and you were right. You also said this hearing, and hopefully more to follow, will explore better policing and racial discrimination regarding the use of force. I was so delighted when I heard you say that, and I'm delighted that you're beginning to carry that out, which is what I interpret this hearing to be. So I trust this will not be the committee's final word. I hope we will be able to have Attorney General Barr before us. He has not agreed to come thus far, but among other things, the Attorney General needs to explain why the Justice Department appears to have abandoned practice or pattern or practice cases, and specifically why the department has declined to open a broader investigation into police misconduct within the Minneapolis Police Department following George Floyd's killing. Mr. Chairman, we have much to do. I don't think we can leave these happenings in abeyance without taking action. And so I trust we will do just that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's my goal to reconcile.
Let me bring some things to your attention so that you understand how government works, because sometimes it can be confusing. And you know, I've done videos in the past where I kind of simplified it for you so that you can speed yourself up. Now, right now, as you know, we're in a pandemic. For some reason, people kind of forget that we're in this damn pandemic, but we are. In certain states, more quarantine than others. New York and California are heavily affected. Partly, I believe, because of immigrants and illegal immigrants and migrants that are still in parts of this world able to fly and interact in this country, which is not good. Needless to say, government, local, state, and federal. The local people have been crying. They've done nothing. They've asked mayors, they've asked senators and local assemblymen, they've asked state assembly people, senators. These are issues and dates and records that I'm not going to go over. Do your own homework. Don't ask me to provide it for you because I've provided enough in the past. Local elected officials, a school board, water board. These are parents who complain about how their children are being harassed. It starts with harassment. Then these kids grow up and they become an adult and they are bullies. And then they become a law-abiding officer, allegedly, and they're still bullies. And now they can legally beat up Black people. George Floyd had somewhat of a knowledge or relationship with this man who killed him. This evil man, the evil cop that killed him. So We don't know the history of the longevity that they might have had from the commencement when they first met. All we know is that the club owner said that they had crossed paths. But we talk about local. Then we get into state. We're talking about governors. We're talking about mayors working with governors. But now we're at the federal level. That's where Trump comes in. That's where this hearing is about. Because the streets have spoken, because the people, beyond the protesters, beyond the looters, beyond the pandemic and the infections and all the crazy stuff that's being approached, and the pushback is why we're at this point. That's why we're at this point, is because of the pushback that the American people have now started to do towards police. Like what? Oh, well, they're starting to kill police, shoot them in their cars, put bleach in their drinks. They're doing this. They are doing this. The streets, good, bad, or indifferent. So I want you to realize it gets to this level when we have become distraught and totally dismayed, and these white people have to look up and see that the two-headed dragon is being grabbed by the neck.
All these proposals to the extent possible and come up with solutions. Senator Booker.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you for allowing me the courtesy of an opening statement, and thank you for your thoughtful comments at the top of this hearing. And I also want to thank the ranking member for her thoughtful comments as well. And Mr. Chairman, I think departing from my prepared remarks, just want to say, what does it say about a nation where two senators from the same state have very different, wildly different experiences with law enforcement right here? In these last few weeks, I've had conversations with Black folks who work for the Senate, people on both sides of the aisle, who all have their shares of stories of traumatizing experiences, of feeling like they were one sudden move or one mistaken moment for experiencing violence. And the challenge is that this has been nothing new. I think if we took the time to listen to each other, we would see that we have a culture where so many parents have to teach their children to be afraid in order to be secure. I heard moving comments on the floor today about one of my colleagues who listened to their staffers where their kids were told by their parents to keep your receipts because you'll be accused of stolen things. I know from my own experiences, having guns drawn on me, being accused of stealing things. The challenge is that this often is unfair, it is unacceptable, it is wrong, but when it explodes like we see it, where people capture on videotape the kind of violence that you were, traumatizing violence that you were going to show. I'm really grateful for Senator Harris, who's been my partner over the last few weeks. And she and I did, as was said by the ranking member, work together with congressional Black caucus leaders and ultimately Chairman Nadler to put together a bill called the Justice in Policing Act. We put it together, obviously, in the wake of George Floyd. We put it in the wake of not just Black men, a Black woman sleeping in her home, and the deaths that have brought to attention much of this in our national discourse, and indeed have brought in all 50 states, literally thousands of protests of people of all backgrounds. I mean all backgrounds, not just race, religion, Republicans and Democrats, who've been calling for an end, a meaningful reform. And yet, even in the days since Kamala and I put together our work with other members of this Senate, as well as people in the House, we continue to see things caught in videotape, as was said before, Rashard Brooks shot in the back. So we need to be very clear. What we're talking about is a nation that has two different justice systems, two different experiences with law enforcement. They go all the way up to this body, if you stop to talk to the Black people who work here, who have very personal stories, including Senator Tim Scott's eloquent exposition on the Senate floor. The unmitigated killing of unarmed Black people in America by law enforcement, not to mention the disparate treatment, is something that we must do something about. We have a choice right now Now, I'm about 51 years old, and since a little bit before my birth till now, there have been so many studies, so many commissions, from the Kerner Commission all the way up to the 21st Century Task Force on Policing, and nothing has changed. Cities from Ferguson to Minneapolis have done a lot of reforms, and as the data has shown, whether it's diversifying your police force, a lot of these things have been done before, but we still see the killing of unarmed African Americans.
Okay, so what are we gonna do?
And so we really have a choice to make. And every day that we don't do something puts more and more of our fellow citizens in danger, not just of death, but of the kind of treatment we would never want our own family to face. We have a choice before us. And so this idea that there is a Republican bill and a Democratic bill, we need to look beyond that for a second and simply understand that the things that are in the bill that Senator Harris and I worked on actually have wild popularity amongst Republicans. You hear Republican leaders, from George Bush, his first address to Congress, said we should stop racially profiling Americans. That's not something radical. It's this idea that we're equal under the law. From chokeholds to no-knock warrants, things that would have saved lives, we have failed to do in this country by making them the law of the land, setting standards for practices in policing that reflect our common values. Republicans and Democrats overwhelmingly support these kind of practices being banned in our country that are in our bill. They would save lives. Breonna Taylor would be alive today. Eric Garner could be alive today. But it's not just setting a standard. Accountability is having ways of measuring progress to those standards. We are a nation that doesn't even collect the data on how many people are shot by police. I ran a police department. I learned the hard way. Without data, there can be no accountability. Without measures. I played football. It's not the standard is you got to be fast to be a wide receiver. If you have no way of measuring that, what good is the standard? Activists, local leaders, the federal government, we all should have transparency into policing. Without that, no accountability. And finally, you said it yourself. Took note of what you said, Mr. Chairman, that unless there are real consequences when you fail to meet standards, whether it's lawsuits or federal action, criminal court, there are two aspects of this bill. Changing a standard in the criminal courts, it's almost difficult, if not impossible, to meet the willfulness standard. That's common sense. And God, qualified immunity, I could start listing, and for sake of time, I won't, all the conservative organizations from the Cato Institute, from the remarks of Clarence Thomas, that support getting rid of qualified immunity. And so I worry in this moment, I really do, that we're going to repeat history, that this is the movie Groundhog Day. Because here we are again, in a nightmare, not a comedy. That here we hear talks of, again, a so-called reform packages, more studies, more nibbling around the edges, as opposed to acting boldly and doing the things that we actually know will hold police officers accountable for their conduct, which will set meaningful standards, will allow us as a federal government to enforce a law. This is not an overstatement or an over-dramatization to say that the stakes right now are high. Will we meet this moment in history and actually do something real, or will we find ourselves back here again a year from now, 3 years from now, with mass protests in the streets by people of all different backgrounds demanding change? And so, Mr. Chairman, the truth is, I actually have faith in us as a country. I don't have faith we're going to get there on time, and justice delayed is justice denied. I, though, believe that there's going to be a time in America when we ban inhuman practices like chokeholds and religious profiling and no-knock entries. I believe there'll be a time in America where we don't treat mental health issues with police in prison. I believe there's going to be a time in America where a Black woman is safe to sleep in her own bed, or a young man reaching for his cell phone won't get shot dead. I believe there will be a time in America when Black parents like mine don't have to fear for the safety of their child who just got their driver's license. I believe there will be a time in America when we understand that public safety is not about simply the number of police on our streets, but about the number of people who no longer live in poverty or are safe to drink their water or don't have to deal with addiction in prison, but can get treatment. There will be a time I know in this country. But if the arc of the moral universe is long and bends towards justice, we have to have the courage now to be the arc benders. The question is not, will we get there? The question is the time now. How many more people have to die in our streets to get us there? How many more people have to suffer the indignities that even our own colleagues have talked about in the United States Senate? I believe the time should be now for us to make bold change, or we will be back here again. These changes will happen, but they should not happen someday. This should be the day. This should be the time so that we can ensure that this nightmare ends in America. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, could I have 1 minute, please?
Yes, you can.
Yes. I want to point out how my state of Iowa is not waiting around for Congress to act. In an 8-day session since the death of Mr. Floyd, Governor Reynolds signed a bill that was unanimously passed by both houses. And why I'm somewhat familiar with this is because my grandson's Speaker of the Iowa House, but it creates, brings additional accountability to Iowa's law enforcement officers by creating stronger restrictions on the use of chokeholds by law enforcement officers, improving law enforcement decertification process to ensure that those who've been fired or resigned after serious misconduct do not work in our state, strengthen the authority of the Iowa Attorney General to prosecute officers whose actions result in death of another, and establishing an annual anti-bias and de-escalation training requirements for officers. I yield.
Thank you. Senator Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Feinstein, for holding this hearing and for the sincerity with which you have approached the subject. And I thank all of our colleagues for what I do believe to be a meaningful discussion with a real commitment to do the work of this committee, which is to do the work of supporting the concepts of justice in America, which include equal under the law, meaning all people will be treated equally by our laws, and we will enforce our laws equally. So I want to thank the entire committee. I want to thank Senator Booker for the courage that you always have to speak truth and your willingness to tell the personal stories. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And you do that not because it is easy, but because you know it needs to be done. And I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, people from every age, gender, race, and religion have been coming together for weeks to protest injustice against Black people in America. We have a duty as United States Senators to be fully aware of our country's history of systemic racism and a responsibility to take serious action toward achieving America's founding ideal of equal justice under law. When we say that America has a history of systemic racism, we mean that from slavery, Jim Crow laws, lynchings, and policing, our institutions have done violence to Black Americans. And it has caused Black Americans to be treated as less than human across time, place, and institution. Let's be clear about what it would mean then to transform our society and eliminate systemic racism. When we truly achieve that ideal, we won't have an unarmed Black man, George Floyd, die from a police officer kneeling on his neck for almost 8 minutes and 48 seconds, actually, exactly 8 minutes and 48 seconds. When we achieve that ideal, it won't mean that we'll have a woman, Breonna Taylor, shot and killed by police officers while she's asleep in her own bed. We won't have an unarmed Black man, Ahmaud Arbery, lynched while going for a run in his own neighborhood. And as George Floyd's brother, Philonise, said last week in his powerful testimony before the House Judiciary Committee, when we eliminate systemic racism, it will be clear to everyone that the life of a Black man is worth more than an allegedly counterfeit $20 bill. Mr. Chairman, there is a movement being led by people who might appear from the outside to have little in common, who are marching together to demand an end to the Black blood that is staining the sidewalks of our country. They are marching together to move us close and closer, at least, to justice. And that gives me hope. It truly gives me hope when I look at who is out there and the commonality of purpose and the unity that they are exhibiting. But we have to recognize that to deal with systemic inequity in our system is not just a policing issue. Inequities are also deeply rooted in our education system, in our housing system, in our workforces, in our healthcare delivery system, and more. And we must fully value Black.
Why do they keep showing him and they ain't showing her? Isn't that kind of strange? Okay, I'll stop. I'll look and listen.
Life. Invest in Black communities and root out inequity wherever it lives. That means
he probably don't know the camera's like totally still on him. Like we waiting for him to get this, like give some kind of like approval of like, okay, whatever.
that across the nation, we must reimagine what public safety looks like. The status quo thinking that more police creates more safety is wrong. It's wrong. And it has motivated too much of municipal budgets and the thinking of policymakers.
Okay, you are a policymaker. You're not a thinker. You are a senator. I'm gonna speed up this because since it's not live, we ain't got to just sit here and suffer this long. I'm gonna speed up to half the speed and hopefully we can understand what they're saying. Because you know how we roll on this show. I ain't trying to keep up and do another 4-hour video. Shout out to all my lovers and good family members, Kiki Green and all the rest of you guys and the flagship who kept me up 4 hours last time. I love y'all. But let's look at this. Look at this man. He's sitting here and they keep the camera on him. This is Camilla Wannabe Black Harris. Wannabe Black Harris. She gonna speak for Black people because she went to a Black university. She done had some fried chicken and some greens. And so she got to make sure she keep her in the Negro card. She got to keep her Negro card, but then she got to keep her good white card and her Indian card. Girls juggling a lot. Let's hear her. I speeded it up.
And has distracted them from what truly will be the smartest use of resources to achieve safety in communities, which is to invest in the health of those communities, and healthy communities, without any doubt, are safe communities. So we must ask our mayors and local leaders to re-examine their priorities and their budgets. We must ask why so much money is being spent to militarize the police, while 2/3 of public school teachers in America today are coming out of their own back pockets.
Now, this is an attorney who's saying we should ask. And this is the problem with Democrats. Y'all keep talking about asking. We ain't asking for nothing. We are telling you this shit's going in. And we're going to have some Ocal corrals going on, and we've been seeing it on the streets. So nobody's asking you. You are elected to do as what you are elected to do. Mr. Graham, Ms. Kamala Wannabe Black Harris, Mr. Booker, Ms. Feinstein, all these people who are speaking are like toting each other's horns like, well, I think we should do something. Oh yeah, because if you don't, the streets are speaking and they're gonna vote your ass out of office.
To help pay for school supplies in our public schools. It's time for us to realize this is not just a moment, but a movement. This committee and our entire federal government have a role to play in holding the police accountable when they break the rules and break the law. And we must be on the right side of history as a committee. We can start to meet the demands of this movement by passing the Justice in Policing Act. And here are a few specific ways. First, we need a national use of force standard. Today, most officers around the country, the standard is to ask if they use excessive force, the standard is to ask, was that use of force reasonable? A much more fair and just question to ask is, was that use of force necessary? We need a national use of force standard. Second, as a former prosecutor, I know that independent investigations into police misconduct are imperative, no matter how well-intentioned a district attorney or a state's attorney. When called upon to investigate the misconduct of a police officer that works in the department they closely work with every day, there will at the very least be an appearance of conflict, if not actual conflict.
Remember, this woman is a prosecutor. She decided to go on the dark side to prosecute Black people. She decided to go on the dark side to become a Democrat. She decided to go on the dark side. So they ain't showing her face for some reason. This is a so-called wannabe black woman speaking. Camilla, wannabe Black Harris.
To do justice in our country is to actually do justice and to have the confidence of the public that there is an appearance of justice. These values are equal. Third, we need truth and transparency. Cities and states have to report police use of force incidents to the federal government. When I was Attorney General of California, I created an open data initiative we named Open Justice, a first of its kind open data initiative to give the people access to information about arrests, bookings, and deaths in custody. The public has a right to know what has happened and what is happening in their communities. And the public can then use that data to help hold us accountable. Instead of requiring that they are always presenting anecdotal information fueled by personal experiences, when the data is available, but we as government possess it, is it not the right and equitable thing to do? To share that data, which we as government possess, with the public so they can grade and judge us appropriately. And lastly, we need to expand pattern and practice investigations into police departments and give state attorneys general the authority to bring these investigations. As Attorney General of California, I activated civil pattern and practice investigations into police departments. And recall, as Senator Feinstein.
Okay, so I'm going to fast forward because I've seen this already and I want to get to more of the juicier parts. And I wanted you to hear just a little bit of those other people. See, when you hear congressional people speak before Senates, they've got this pattern. Now think of yourself as a writer. And you know, when they taught us to write, they said there's an opening, there's the closing, and there's beginning, and then, you know, there's the middle. So actually there's the opening, closing, and middle. So she had to do her opening. And then as she goes into her close, she closes about herself. These are patterns that these legislators want to do. Look, this is what I've done, and this is what I've done. Who gives a rat's ass of your past, bitch? We want to talk about today. This is why we need to pull back and get all these people out of office. This woman has got 1 foot on the ground and 1 foot on the earth. Miss Lady right here. She's almost 80 years old. They need to step down and let somebody in their 40s, let somebody in their 50s, look, let them lead or go younger. Or if you want more seasoned knowledge people, 40, 50, 60. No, these people are 80 years old and they get people they can control like Camilla wannabe Black Harris and Cory Booker, Buckeyed Booker, Democrat Booker. But needless to say, I need you to pay attention to this next portion of this video because we're going to break down this portion because it's important that we hear from people like you and I in the community. And that's where we're at. And that's where I want you to hear.
I'm sorry. I'd like to, first of all, thank you, Chairman Graham, for the hearing. The murder of George Floyd by police officers, a police officer, ignited the call for reform and measures to rectify lingering racism that plagues our country. To Mr. Barrett here and to the Floyd family not here, please know that the grief and shock that we feel, that it will fuel action to prevent more tragic and unnecessary deaths. While the vast majority of law enforcement officers are public servants that deserve support and respect, George Floyd's murder shows we're not nearly doing enough to prevent abuse by police. I welcome tough conversation. I built a legislative and oversight career of rooting out instances where accountability is needed and where abuses must end. I led on the First Step Act to rectify shortcomings of our criminal justice system, which we know.
Now, Mr. Grassley says, I welcome tough conversations. You know, when these people say stuff, y'all need to hold them accountable to their words. If this is one of your legislative representatives, you need to contact him and say, I'd like to have some conversations with you. You stated in a hearing with the Senate today that you welcome tough conversations. Honey, I think there's enough grassroots people that can talk to Mr. Grassley to set some things straight. Y'all pushing in this man's district, keep pushing.
Impacts disproportionately minority men and women. I investigated the 2017 shooting of Bijan Gazer, which revealed instances of poor de-escalation tactics and inappropriate aggressive use of force. We must come together and address deadly use of force, racial biases, and police abuse, and do it now. My first question is to Dr. Goff, and while he's coming on, I'll lead in with this. I've long supported efforts to increase transparency and accountability of all government actors. Police officers are no different. That's why I've co-sponsored Senator Tim Scott's bill, which would increase transparency by the use of force, by requiring reports where there's...
Now, I want you to keep in mind, someone wrote the script for him because his ass is old and he ain't gonna remember all this. So they wrote this script out, so he stays on script. That's why he can't look up and he can't acknowledge this is my words and this is how I feel. He can't do that, taking his head nod and looking across the room. He's got to stay to script and code.
There's been death or serious injury because just a minority of jurisdictions are reporting that. So my first question to you, sir, is I assume that this data would be helpful in understanding how to prevent unnecessary use of force. If you disagree with that, say so, but I assume that might be. So if so, how can increased transparency into incidents of deadly or unnecessary use of force help protect members of the community as well as police officers?
Thank you for the question, Senator Grassley. Your assumption is correct. If we collected those data nationally, that could be absolutely useful to preventing those kinds of tragedies going forward. But just as important is collecting the information where deadly force could have been used, but wasn't. Because to do the right kind of analysis, what you need to know is a lot about the universe where force could be used. Those are the data that have been historically missing, and that's part of the reason why the analyses have been so inconclusive. So I would want to focus the committee's attention not just on what data are collected, but how we get the right kind of analyses, because the analyses are ultimately what's going to inform decision making.
Okay, thank you. Now to Mayor Carter and also Dr. Goff. Police officers should be seen not just as enforcers of the law, but as neighbors and members of the community. However, many cops don't live in the area they patrol, so a natural divide and mistrust can form. To you two, I'll start with Mayor Carter. How can we encourage more engagement and trust between police officers and those they patrol?
Senator, that's an important question. I really appreciate it. I heard a conversation earlier about what the officers look like. I think that's a part of the conversation. But much more importantly, I think what you're getting at is officers who are isolated to more. So it's not just about hiring an officer that gets people to understand. It's not people who are part of the community in the first place. I've always said if you go very well, and you go to your children go to school, you can come up with a whole lot of ways to the reasons not to shoot someone. I think that's very important. We have a number of examples of ways that departments across the country that are identified. The police experience program, a law enforcement career pathways academy, that's designed to take over the high school out of local neighborhoods and make police officers more funded and things like that, more money incentives for officers of the community for help.
Okay, and I'll yield after Dr. Oh, I'm sorry, did I interrupt him? Dr. Goff, your answer, and then I'll have to yield to the next questioner.
No, so absolutely, it can be useful for the community to see themselves reflected in their law enforcement protectors. I would also say, though, the focus to the degree that we can keep there should be on law enforcement culture, not just on policies. I'm giving law enforcement the tools to make sure the people who advance and the people who get fired, the people who get hired reflect the cultural values of protecting the community and investing in community empowerment and voice, rather than just sets of policies which may or may not get fired. Culture, eat policies for breakfast, and we do well to remember that as we revise our interventions.
So I like what more of the Phillips is coming from, which is that we've got these people who are not even really living in our communities. They're police who come in and have no ideas of how the community people are, who they are, their schools. They are just programmed by whoever the last leader in their administration or in their precinct tell them about what Black people are and who they are. Again, this treating of us being subhuman has to end. And the streets are talking. So now they pull these gentlemen in to get their perspective. But, keep in mind, these are legislators who could do a difference from a federal level to enforce a state and local level. And that's why we've gotten to this point.
Thank you. Senator Leahy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate this hearing, but I especially appreciate the testimony we've heard. Now, I'm going to ask Ms. Gupta a question in an area that she's well familiar with. We've seen the proven track record pattern of practice investigations, what it can do. But despite the proven track record of reducing police shootings, the Justice Department, the Trump Justice Department, has effectively abandoned pattern of practice investigations and the use of consent decrees. I think it was 14, if I'm correct, consent decrees were enforced under the Obama administration. I don't believe a single one has been enforced under President Trump. So my question to you, Ms. Gupta, you are a former head of the Justice Department Civil Rights Division. How do pattern or practice investigation and consent decrees?
This is what I keep wondering. Why do they keep pivoting back to Obama? Well, see, under President Obama, we were able to get this, and well, look, I'm gonna be honest. This goes way back before Obama. This is presidents like Obama. And you can go back to Bush and Carter and Reagan and Nixon. I mean, come on, Lyndon B. Johnson. I mean, Kennedy. I mean, come on. Don't you people know Black history? But you're going to give Obama credit for the correction? There has been no correction. There's been even more of an enforcement. That is why the streets are talking.
Make a difference in changing police practices.
Well, the Justice Department, in a nation with 18,000 police departments, use this tool pretty judiciously, but would conduct an investigation after being made aware of systemic problems in a police department. These investigations often were anywhere between 6 months to a year. Very deep investigations involving interviews with hundreds and hundreds of community residents, hundreds and hundreds of police officers, police leadership, looking at all kinds of data, doing statistical analysis and the like, looking at training, accountability, supervision. And if their Justice Department made a finding of systemic unconstitutional policing problems in a jurisdiction, it would produce a report, make public findings of this report, and begin to negotiate a consent decree. On rare occasions, it would involve litigation, but in most instances, the jurisdiction of the city would settle and produce a far-yielding document that would allow, because it would be filed with a federal judge, allow for politics to be taken out and long-term sustainable change over the course of whatever political administrations may come and go.
And that's the reason I asked the question. Does it send a message if you don't use these tools, if you have documented police misconduct? Isn't that saying, well, we're just going to close our eye to it?
Yeah, I think it has sent a very dangerous signal for the Justice Department to have shut this work down. I think it creates more of a culture of impunity in a sense that there isn't a watchdog agency that has been historically, through Republican and Democratic administrations, played a really important role in ensuring constitutional.
Well, and the reason I asked the question, I don't think of Vermont as being a microcosm of the country, but I've never heard such across the political spectrum the kind of concerns I've heard is happening. And then in the hundreds and thousands of emails I get from around the country.
That's because you're disconnected. He's like, oh, this is just fascinating. This is phenomenal. This is mind-blowing. This is why he has his hand and his gestures are like, I need to hear more of this with your Negro people and what they're going through. This moves my mind. This boggles my mind. Come on, old man. Oh, white man, you ain't never cared before. Do you know why you care? Because the streets are talking.
People say this movement is simply not going to go away after some time, as others have. I hope they're right. What would you tell members of Congress who think we can just wait and see?
This waiting and seeing will mean more people will die. And I think it will undermine any sense that we have a legal system that is legitimate and fair in people's eyes, and ultimately that undermines public safety.
Well, I happen to agree with you. And it's, we have to keep talking about it. I have a question for Mr. Merritt on, with any other civil rights issue, legal protections against police brutality will only be meaningful if they can be enforced in a court of law. I'm a lawyer, I was a prosecutor, I was a trial lawyer. Many who opposed making changes to the qualified immunity doctrine. And it's been pretty evident it's prevented victims of even horrific police brutality from getting redress in court. They argue it's going to open excess litigation and prosecution of police officers. How do you respond to that, Mr. Merritt?
First, I'll say that we've done a review of case law in the area, and there are several officers over an expansive period of time that have been granted qualified immunity for applying a need to someone's body and them expiring during the course of that. In other words, their chauvinist right to benefit from the protections of.
In other words, using the need to kill somebody.
That's correct. So stated plainly, using the need to kill somebody is the kind of thing that gets you qualified immunity in America. The scary thing is, the concern is that if you remove qualified immunity, you flood the courts with cases of officers killing people. Most nations don't kill that many people that's a legitimate concern. Only in America is that a problem. So the answer, of course, to the question is stop killing so many people.
Thank you. You said what was on my mind. I have other questions. Can I submit them further?
Absolutely. Senator Corn.
I thank all the witnesses.
Okay. One of the reasons they kill so many people or they incarcerate so many people is also because of privatized prisons. So we can justify the prisons because we've had to kill so many people because they're so evil. And if you don't want any more of these evil people, the ones that we don't kill, we need to put them in a privatized prison. And then when we put them in a privatized prisons, there's a profit margin. And then when we get the profit margins, we're looking at, oh, they're going to go live on the stock exchange. I tell you what we're going to do. After they're live on the stock exchange, we're going to add more to this fuel, to this fire. We're going to be able to have it so that we can auction Negroes through the stock exchange. So then you can invest in privatized prisons and get a return on your money. We are still used as commoditized good trades and services. And because of that, we have to knock off a couple of Negroes to justify that money. Let's keep going.
Senator Corn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask the witnesses to tell us if they believe that the police department and the police in America are systemically racist. Does anybody like to raise their hand and agreeing with that statement? Mr. Merritt? I'm sorry, Professor Logan. Professor Logan, I can't see that far away. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
So we got two that think this is systemic, and that means all 18,000 police departments, all 800,000 law enforcement officers. Is that your view?
I think if you couch it in the system and not me, I don't know all 18,000, but the system in and of itself has systemic racism.
I'm sorry if I may, Senator. The reason that I've observed that all police in America is embroidered in a system.
My question is before they answer, because they're going to answer some good answers. He's been very good. I got to go back to that question. Like, why would he ask that kind of a question? And the woman's got her hand up, by the way. He didn't address this woman. Well, I'm back too far. He didn't address that woman. And then he folds his hand. The body language says it a lot. See, because he's upset that these two Negroes in the room, instead of, notice that Senator Booker and Kamala Harris didn't raise their hand. Now.
Senator Cornyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask the witnesses to tell us if they believe that the police department and the police in America are systemically racist. Does anybody like to raise their hand agreeing with that statement? Mr. Merritt?
Look at his hands, they're folded.
I'm sorry, Professor Logan. Professor Logan, I can't see that far away, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
So we have two that think this is systemic, and that means all 18,000 police departments, all 800,000 law enforcement officers. Is that your view?
I think if you couch it in the system and not.
Now, he phrased this question. I know y'all want to hear this man's answer. I'm going to get to it. Hold on. Hang in there with me. Get the thumbs up button. I see there's a lot of y'all watching. I ain't got a lot of thumbs up buttons. What did I ask for? I ain't even asking for a donation. Thank God I got a donation. Shout out to Classy Black Man for his donation, and anyone else make a donation. And make sure you follow me on my Snapchat. Look, this man is leading this question to say, you're trying to tell me all cops are bad? And this brother's about to break it down for him because he's trying to prove you guys are wrong. You're wrong thinking that systemic racism is within police departments, even though there's documentary history of deaths, and he still doesn't want to accept it. Let's hear what this brother has to say now.
Not me. I don't know all 18,000, but the system in and of itself has systemic racism.
I'm sorry if I may, Senator. The reason that I've observed that all police in America is embroidered in a systematic racism is because their mission is bad. We empower our police to go over police inner city communities, to go in there and find drugs and guns and punish wrongdoers. The issue is the problems in the inner city community are blight or poverty or sickness or homelessness. Those aren't situations that are necessarily remedied by a man with a gun. But rather the appropriate social workers, for example, or healthcare workers that would remedy the problem. When we over-concentrate our communities, with Black and brown communities specifically, with militarized policing, what you're going to have is disproportionate use of force and incarceration of Black and brown people.
Well, Mr. Merritt, to the extent that you are suggesting that we're asking our law enforcement officials to do more than just enforce the law, to be social workers, mental health providers, and the like. I think Chief Brown, formerly of the Dallas Police Department, said we ask our police to do too much. And that's probably true in my view. A number of jurisdictions have experimented successfully with a team approach, for example, to try to reduce or de-escalate the confrontation when it comes to people with mental illness or the like. And certainly I think all of us see the benefit of de-escalation training. But to what extent is the problem that we have with excessive use of force and lack of trust with the police a matter of class as opposed to race? In other words, it doesn't depend on the color of your skin, but whether you're poor or lack opportunities in our society.
Senator Cornyn, in the United States of America, it's a little difficult to disentangle those two. And I don't think there's an institution in this country that isn't suffering from structural racism given our history. I think the goal of taking action in this moment is to recognize that there are things that Congress can do to end the killings in our streets, to provide law enforcement with greater training support, to make national standards on things that frankly should have been national standards years ago. This is the time to take action given the pain on the streets and in communities. And this is just the reality of what communities have been experiencing. But they're
I don't have very long to ask questions. So let me ask you, you changed the phrase from systemic to structural racism. What does that mean? That means everything, every institution, every person in America is a racist?
It means that there is bias built into existing institutions. And the policing, there have been any number of courageous police chiefs that have spoken to the history of systemic racism in policing as well.
Do you think systemic or structural racism can exist in a system that that requires individual responsibility? Or do you think it's one or the other?
I think every American institution has been kind of shaped by these forces, and our goal is to do what we can as policymakers, as advocates, to take that out and to provide and to try to fight it in the modern day iterations that it appears.
Well, do you believe that basically all Americans are racist?
I think we all have implicit bias and racial bias. Yes, I do.
Wow.
And I think that we are an amazing country that strives to be better every single day. It's why I went to government, to make a more perfect union.
Well, you lost me when you want to take the acts of a few misguided, perhaps malicious individuals and ascribe that to all Americans, not just our 800,000 police officers, our 18,000 police departments. I think, thank you for your answer.
Somebody has a mic on. Could you please mute it from the remote locations, I think? Okay, Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Let me respond to Senator Cornyn's question, because I think what we find, Senator Cornyn, is that— I didn't ask you a question. Well, I think you asked them a question, which I would like to try to answer. If you take a look at our system of justice and start with the premise that when it comes to drug users, there's an equal percentage of white and black drug users. Now you look at the number arrested for the use of drugs, turns out more blacks than whites. The number convicted, the number prosecuted, the number incarcerated, dramatically larger among the African-American population. There's something built into our system that doesn't equate actual criminal conduct or criminal disposition towards the penalties that we assess. And my only suggestion is that could well be a function of poverty as opposed to color. How it starts, I'm not sure, but I can tell you at the end of the system, the result is the same. Can I mention two other issues, if I can, that the chairman has raised, and I'd like for him to consider this. Back in the day, before I was elected to Congress, I was defending the sheriff of a rural county in Illinois, and he was being sued for the mistreatment of a prisoner in jail. How did I end up defending him? Not because I was the state's attorney, not because I was in public office, but because I worked for an insurance company. And it turned out that DeWitt County, Illinois, had an insurance policy that covered the sheriff. So when the sheriff was sued for wrongdoing as the sheriff, ultimately the county, DeWitt County, stepped in and indemnified him for any liability he might have. So it turns out, Mr. Chairman, that in 99 to 100% of these cases against the wrongdoing of an individual officer, there is an employer who steps in and provides an insurance policy and coverage that pays whatever needs to be paid.
Whoa, whoa. Y'all know, did you hear what this man said? They already know. They already know. They know no matter what we do, we gonna kill you, Negro. I got insurance to cover me. I got insurance. That's what the police officer and the so-called peace officers are doing. They know they got protection. But if we start pulling the rug, say, no, 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 you lose your pension, there's no insurance, there's no money backing you. Oh, you're going to go to jail, you will be prosecuted, and we're throwing you back to the wolves. They would treat you more humane, but why treat a Negro humane when I got an insurance policy on you? They got my back. Come on now.
I'll tell you, as a former trial lawyer, I didn't go after the motorcycles of defendants. I was looking for their insurance policies. So I think the personal liability issue which you raised is covered by the fact that 99 to 100% of these cases involve insurance policies. But they never get to the question of liability because they can't get around the basic issue of qualified immunity. They can't match up on all fours, misconduct with something that's already been tried. Mr. Merritt, has that been your experience?
That has.
So I would just answer your question, Mr. Chairman. Yes. Those who are guilty of wrongdoing should be held on a civil basis for their wrongdoing. And no, it would not mean that their homes be taken away from their wives in that regard. Can I ask this question, if I might?
Oh, so if they do wrongdoings, their homes won't be taken away from their wives. Take their homes, take their pension, take their livelihood, and take their job. Because when we've gotten to a point where we in America have allowed law enforcers to feel at a level that Black people are subhuman, and they are the ultimate superiority and authority and treatment of mankind. Because you carry that gun, Mr. Police Officer, we got a little problem here. That's why the streets are talking.
We've talked a lot about the conduct of those who are in law enforcement. And I recently had a roundtable last Friday in Chicago, and a representative of the National Alliance of Mental Illness. Now, we all know that mental illness is part of this conversation. And what we found was kind of an eye-opener from the viewpoint of law enforcement officers. The highest.
Okay, now I gotta break it down. Be patient with me. Get the thumbs up button. Share this video on groups. Be patient with me. I gotta break down something about this. It's dear to my heart. Mental illness is because I'm dealing with it in Los Angeles with the homeless Black people. These people were not always mentally ill. They were displaced by immigrants and illegal immigrants. Someone said it in the chat room. I'm reading the chat room as this thing plays. I don't know if it was Valerie or somebody. It might have been Valerie Hall. Thank you, Valerie. And thank you, Durham, for that $10 donations. Woo! Thank you, brother. Mental illness has plagued our community because of the psychological games that white America has played on our people. Let me explain. When we talk about immigrants and illegal immigrants, we talk about the displacement by allowing migrants to come in through EB-5 visas and allowing them to buy up our businesses, our schools, our markets, our stores. And then when we live in the neighborhood, these people are abusive to us. They're mean to us. And then they find other Black people to front for us, like at the beauty supply stores. Y'all sisters see them Chinese and Koreans run those stores, and they always find one Black face to calm down the crowds because them Asians know, well, let's just put a Black face on it. But see, that plays mental games where we buy our stuff to just live. I just want to get some stuff for my hair. I didn't want to go through all that drama. I just wanted to go to a little store. I didn't know how my daughter was going to get shot in the back in 1980s. Not my daughter, but you know, one of our people got shot in the back because she said some shit and had turned her back and the woman got a gun and got off because the judge let her go off. And then they went after the judge when they should have said, stop this immigration in our community. The energy got transferred the wrong way. So if they want to know why we mentally or emotionally upset and dissound in this country, it's because of systemic racism and oppression of government policies of suppressing a nation of people for decades. So don't come in thinking that we mental people. We don't have mental issues, obviously, because we built this country. We laid the foundation for this country. What you've done is you dismantled us, white America, and legislators, and we have because we've allowed you to stay in office. Y'all need to wake up. If these people ain't gonna work in your best interest, and they know like he knows, he's gonna tell you the story like, well, I know because I represented someone in the court regarding insurance policies. I know because I got another story. Well, if you know this, why did it have to take to this point, Mr. Durbin? Why did it take to this point that we are now before the courts and the Senate in a pandemic, with the world is watching us to see the outcome of your decision-making that should have been implemented before we built up to this point? It is the lawmakers' faults, and it's our faults for putting them in office.
Incidents of suicide among any profession in America are men and women in law enforcement. And they have 5 times as frequently PTSD and depression. It appears that there are some issues with their life.
Thank you, Pam. Letitia Harley, the Harlins. Y'all need to look that Black girl up. That's the one that they shot in the back. That little girl walked away and that Korean person shot her in the back in the 1980s. That's what ignited me. Now you guys need to find your own story, but I'm not letting that story go.
Lifestyle, their job, the availability of weapons, the stress they go through that create a very vulnerable population among law enforcement officials. I believe we need to address, and I'm happy to co-sponsor this legislation of Senators Booker and Harris and others. I believe we need to address that side of the equation. I believe there's been, and we've seen it in videotape and proven it with DNA, there has been racism and unfairness in our administration of justice. But we also try to address, at least in parts of this bill, the training of those who aren't in law enforcement, to try to find those who are not stable, those who are not fair, those who are too biased, and those who shouldn't have a badge and a gun. And so let me just address that for an issue for a moment.
That's the illegal immigrants that you got in Los Angeles. Is these women who are nothing but 5'2" with a gun, wearing 90 pounds of gear on their body. Those women should not be able to carry a gun. Those women in Los Angeles should be taken away, their badges should be taken away because they're emotionally disabled. They're emotionally disabled. They're not stable women to me. Because if I'm gonna stand over you and I'm not no little 5'4", I'm a tall with a black. If I'm gonna stand over to you and I will be calm and civil, but you're intimidated by my body position or my body size and my height, and you don't understand authority because you are a little woman, you should not be given no gun. But in California, we have El Salvadorians, we have Guatemalans, and you say, well, Shirley, you're discriminating. No, I'm setting a standard. I'm setting a standard for people can do jobs better than others. And it has nothing to do with discriminating. They understand that certain law officials with certain body types should be the ones allotted. But in California, that's why you're down to 6%. Most of the brothers who used to live here, they're in jail. They're in jail and they're dead. So now you've got a cultural and race war going on in this country because you've hired the wrong people to do the job. Just admit it. Don't call it racist. Call it the truth and anti-Black, because those people are anti-Black.
Ms. Gupta, would you like to address that issue? It strikes me that we've got to consider that aspect of it if we want a police force in the future that we can count on not to repeat the sins of the past.
Yeah, I mean, on these issues, the Justice Department consent decrees always had provisions on officer wellness, and because the mental health issues among police officers was a big concern around accountability issues, discipline issues, and the like. And that was built into these consent decrees because they had to be taken seriously. And the other issue that you just mentioned around de-escalation, use of force, different training, bringing mental health teams in so that mental health professionals were paired with police officers when arriving on the scene with people in mental health crisis was another thing that was a really common theme. But both of these issues around mental health and policing were really important.
The last point I'll make is questions have been raised. Why, when the one officer with his knee on the neck of that poor man, literally killing him, was engaged in that conduct while he was, I believe he had shackled, had cuffs on at some point, so he was no visible threat. What were the other three officers doing? Why wasn't there some attempt at intervention? And some have explained to me that because there's a military structure to our police that the chain of command makes peer intervention difficult, if not impossible. And I think we have to address that when we talk about policing in the future.
Thank you. Senator Lee. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We all know that about the brutal and senseless killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. There's no excuse, nor can there be, for what the police did to Mr. Floyd. His killers, fortunately, are being brought to justice. His death, we hope, will not be remembered solely for being the senseless act of violence that falsely was launched in his name, but rather, hopefully, his memory will be made permanent in our national consciousness in the long-term reform of policing policies across our country. In my home state of Utah, the city of Ogden is still mourning over another death, that of police officer Nate Lyday. On May 28th, a woman called 911 saying that her husband was threatening her life.
Now, he comes from a Mormon state. Mormons don't care for Black people. I know I'm gonna get hit with this because I got some Mormon friends. I'm gonna be honest with y'all. Do your homework. Don't take me for my word. You know, I like to come in with some receipts. So let's talk about the Mormon church. Just a quick pause. The Mormon church didn't believe that Black people could be leaders. But now you notice you got a couple that Mia loved, who's no longer in office, who did nothing for Black people, was not Black. She was Haitian. Because the Mormon church started converting Haitian people, saying, look, we've got Black people too. And then they would make them marry Mormon men, Caucasian preferably Mormon men, and convert these people and said, these are African Americans who are now Mormon. But notice how he's pivoting from this tragedy with George Floyd and Black people issues. Now we got to talk about how white people are getting shot in Utah.
Lyday and a group of officers arrived promptly at the home. The man inside the home began shooting at them from inside. Lyday was mortally wounded. Officer Lyday was only 24 years old. He was about to celebrate his 5th wedding anniversary to his wife, Ashley. He had been on the job as a police officer for just 15 months. By all accounts, Officer Lyday did his job honorably and completely, very much up until the moment he drew his last breath after being mortally wounded on the job. Nate Lyday was an officer who sought to uphold justice and protect the innocent, even making the ultimate sacrifice on behalf of a threatened and fearful family. Nate Lyday's loss really is our loss. It's a loss for everyone. George Floyd's loss is also our loss. It's a loss for everyone as well. And we ought to remember and revere them both. I think we can do precisely that. And the residents of Ogden, Utah are a good example of how that can happen. They came together for a peaceful protest in order to draw attention to both of these tragic deaths. This was a protest that ended and started peacefully and brought members of the Ogden community together rather than pulling them apart. So this is an important—
It went peaceful because there ain't no black people in Utah. Okay, not that black people are unpeaceful, but you don't have a floodation of immigrants and illegal immigrants like New York, California, DC. Y'all don't have all them foreign folks in your state. And you don't have no black people. So you just talking amongst yourself. That's why you got to constantly bring up the story. You got to bring up the story about the white cop. But go ahead, you're trying to do a collation. Continue.
Important issue. It's one that we've got to continue to focus on. In 2012 in Camden, New Jersey, Camden, New Jersey had the highest rate of crime in the entire nation, as I understand it. In addition to rampant crime, the police department in Camden, New Jersey discovered extensive corruption among the police force, with officers routinely planting evidence on suspects, fabricating reports, and in many circumstances, committing perjury. This behavior was so pervasive that a total of 88 convictions had to be reversed as a result of it. And as a result of this fallout, the governor and the mayor decided to disband the Camden, New Jersey police force and transferred the policing of the city over to the county. Now, notably, the rebuilding of this new Metro Police Department moved forward without the involvement of a number of people who had previously been involved in it, including the police union. Officers from the disbanded Camden Police Department were invited to apply for the new police force, and over 100 of them, a little less than half, as far as we can tell, were eventually rehired. But as a result of this restructuring, response times improved. Now a person waiting for a police responder waits, I'm told, an average of 4.4 minutes, instead of the previous average, which I'm told was over 60 minutes. Violent crimes in Camden have dropped 42% in just 7 years. All of this was done without a union. And in fact, all of this was done by freeing the department from a collective bargaining agreement that, as it's been explained to me, had previously locked the city and the city's police department into an unholy alliance with some officers who had violent and, in many cases, lawless tendencies. And so this brought about what, by all outwardly observable metrics, seemed to be a better set of circumstances. So, Mr. Logan, I want to thank you for being here and for your healing words. I appreciate your account of the progress that's been made in Camden. And in your written testimony, you mentioned the difficult balance that has to be struck in order to empower police officers to do their difficult work, while also holding accountable those who disregard the justice that they're entrusted to uphold. In your view, did this restructuring that happened in Camden, tell me about how it helped to recalibrate that balance between power and authority that you mentioned?
Thank you, Senator. I would say that they listen to the people, from town hall meetings to conversations. Once what we're doing here, they begin to hear from regular residents. And I remember Governor Christie came to a hall near my house and had several clergymen and regular residents speak into their struggles, their challenges, their fears, and the issues of Camden in its broken state. And Mayor Red just did a great job of hearing and almost re-saying to make sure that we were heard. And from that, as the new officers, again, the community policing, as they walk the streets.
Now listen, this is nothing new. They know what they need to do. They just never wanted to do it. It affected their pocketbooks. They know that we needed police reform. They knew that the structure of the system was not working. They knew that police officers got paid if they killed a Negro, so their families were okay. These white men will be okay. Their families got insurance, even if they go to jail, their families are okay. Remember BF1. Why do you know why I keep pushing BF1 instead of B1? Because they take care of their families. This man is talking about his Black community and Black families, and he welcomes the police into their family, and they have a cookout and a connection. Listen to the story.
As a preacher, I'm good for a block party and an impromptu cookout. I never forget, I was cooking on the corner and one of the officers, everybody called me Pastor Diddy. So he said, Pastor Diddy, man, I'm gonna go get some more hot dogs because we're out. This officer goes and gets hot dogs and comes back and he's electric sliding on the block. That would have never happened in Camden. That connection, that relationship now, if that officer was to pull over somebody, it changes the whole story. And so that accountability was that relationship created the accountability that also was put in place, because now a big thing that happened in Camden, we didn't know half the officials. So their faces were very visible and conversations were constantly happening. And therefore, and we had the baseball cards with the police officers. All those type of things built into our connection, our relationship, which allowed for a level of trust. And in 10 seconds, I got pulled over in front of my house at a cookout, coming back with some more food. And one of the officers was talking a little rough to me. And I was at my house. And the other officer said something to the effect of, "Oh, you're the pastor, right?" I said, "Yeah." And he sort of told the guy, "Calm down, he lives right here." It was that simple. I don't know if that story would have been the same in 06, in 07. And 2012 was rough. One of that key murder that was in December was in front of my church building on Saturday night. And
2012 was under Obama, where all the Obama elected officials talking about Obama was so great. That was under Obama.
I had the tape out when I showed up to church Sunday morning, and our congregation cried. I preached outside and prayed that God would change the city and he would use his church, and that we would preach Christ Jesus and things would change. And we had a good mayor who came to my church and visited a couple of times, and I have family that live there now, and they are benefiting from a new police department.
Senator Lee, if you don't mind me adding briefly, if the rules allow. So I would be remiss not to mention this. I taught in Camden, New Jersey. This was my first job out of undergrad. I taught at Morehouse College. I will be very brief. One thing to Senator Graham's, Chairman Graham's point was they made it a particular effort to recruit from Camden. So one of my former students, Jimmy Mercado, is now a police officer in Camden. When he goes into some of the rougher neighborhoods, they know Jimmy, right? Just like they knew Pastor here. That does make a difference to your point, Mr. Graham.
And I know this committee is an interesting experience. I enjoy it. Nobody else does. I learn a lot. What percentage of the Camden police force?
Now, notice how his face kind of lit up compared to when we saw his face at the beginning of this video. He kind of lit up. He's falling asleep on the Camilla Harris. God knows everybody would. But he seems, before y'all start throwing stones, he seems to have a genuine concern of acknowledgement that there is a problem.
First was minority before their
I did say seem.
I don't have those numbers. I don't have those numbers. I know after it was like 50.
One of my former students, Jimmy Mercado, is now a police officer in Camden. When he goes into some of the rougher neighborhoods, they know Jimmy, right? Just like they knew Pastor here. That does make a difference to your point, Mr. Graham.
And I know this committee is an interesting experience. I enjoy it. Nobody else does. I learn a lot. What percentage of the Camden police force was minority before their
I don't have those numbers. I don't have those numbers. I know after it was like 50 some odd percent.
I can't say that there are neighboring communities there, and the concern was that most people came from neighboring communities there that did not.
So it really is about being from the community as much as anything else, getting out and about. That's as important as the racial makeup of the police force.
I believe so, Mr. Chairman.
The only thing I would just want to add, Senator, is there have been studies, though, about diversity in law enforcement. And of course, it matters deeply for trust, but studies actually show that diversity does not impact use of force rates and misconduct in the way that one would anticipate. So it matters.
That's what I'm learning from this hearing. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all for being here for this hearing.
5 Utah minutes.
I want to take a moment on Section 1983, which, as you know, is the primary vehicle for assessing liability for police misconduct. And as you also know, the primary defense against that liability, and it's even a pretrial defense, is the defense of qualified immunity, which is the subject of the Booker-Harris legislation. Now, qualified immunity, as I understand it, limits liability, narrows the window of conduct for which an officer can be held liable, and its original purpose was to protect the individual officer. At the same time that it does that, however, it has the effect of depriving the injured or wronged person of their recovery. And also, it dulls the signal back into the agency that something is wrong because they got away with it because of qualified immunity. So as we've heard today, police officers are actually almost always indemnified by their departments
And it's interesting to think of it because the only way you get by qualified immunity is if you had if a reasonable person would have known that what you did was unconstitutional. And
reasonable police officer.
Yeah, and that group of people who reasonably should have known that what they did was unconstitutional, they're the ones that are getting indemnified.
That's right.
So it's not like there's some like bad cases where we don't indemnify.
Okay, so here's that loophole. I'm gonna stop right here. Let's breathe, family. Get the thumbs up button, share this video. Thank you for all you guys who made your donations. Let's breathe here. The police officer knows there's a loophole. This is what they talk about in their private quarters. Look, if you kill one of these niggas, don't even worry about it. There's a loophole. Oh, really? I won't go to jail. No. The odds are 9-1 that you may go to jail. We've got some policies and insurance policies to protect you. This is part of their conversion. This is part of their conversation when they get you to recruit you. This is part of their recruit to say, we're going to CYA you. This is what we do for each other. Nobody CYA me. No one CYA my people on the streets. Now, come on now. But these legislators know these loopholes. You heard the other guy said, look, I'm an elected official, but one time I was an insurance broker. I know the loopholes of the contracts. Why did they wait to this point? Why? Because the streets are talking. Shout out to Dave Chappelle.
Today, police officers are actually almost always indemnified by their departments. And it's interesting to think of it because the only way you get by qualified immunity is if you had if a reasonable person would have known that what you did was unconstitutional. And police officer, yeah. And that group of people who reasonably should have known that what they did was unconstitutional, they're the ones that are getting indemnified. That's right. So it's not like there's some like bad cases where we don't indemnify, and the good cases we do. Indemnification is the constant here, pretty much. And in addition to the study Senator Harris cited, there's another report that described the indemnification as occurring virtually always. So one wonders, why should the department be obliged to pay? And it seems that there are a lot of obvious reasons. One, they set the policy that the officers follow. Two, they set the procedures that the officers follow. Three, they establish the training that the officers follow. Four, they dominate the culture that the officers follow. And finally, they provide the discipline that the officers must adhere to. They are the employers in a nutshell. So I look outside of the police cases to regular employer liability, and there you find an ancient doctrine, vicarious liability, respondeat superior, in which if you're acting within the scope of your employment, your employer owns it. That's right. And UPS drivers drive really safely because UPS knows they own those wrecks and they're going to make darn sure. A private company that is paying for security services is going to lean towards hiring bonded security professionals because they know that if they screw up, the company owns it. So the incentives are in the right place. So here's my worry, and here's what I'd like you to think about. We've got a couple of choices here. We can leave qualified immunity alone. I think that would be a terrible mistake. So that means we should strip out qualified immunity. And then we can do one of two things. We can either just do that and hope that indemnity survives. But Mr. Merritt, as you said, there's going to be a flood of cases that qualified immunity defenses have kept out of the courtrooms. And right now, indemnification of officers stands on a fairly rickety structure of a mix of policy, practice, municipal ordinance, state law. You agree with that?
So far, yes, sir.
Yeah, you've tried these cases, you know this. So if there's this surge of cases because we've stripped qualified immunity away, it seems to me that we also need to lock down where everybody is right now, which is indemnification. That officers are now virtually always indemnified. After we've stripped away qualified immunity, they should stay indemnified. The vicarious liability, one of the oldest and most established doctrines in the law, would provide that, and that would be a fairly sensible backstop to make sure that Chairman Graham's concerned that an officer who does something wrong doesn't lose his house, and to also meet all of our concern that the departments get behind the policies, the procedures, the training, the culture, and the discipline that will, to your point, Mr. Merritt, prevent these things from happening in the first place.
Okay, let me stop. I need to break that down because that's a lot and that can become confusing. So basically, I'm going to put it in a layman's term. There are laws to protect police officers. You guys all understand that in the chat room, right? Put BF1, put that in the chat room right now. I see you. Put BF1 if you understand that. There are insurance policies to protect them. BF1. We all got that part. What he is saying, we need to do more. We need to add on another layer. Like this guy who killed George Floyd had been approached before for his ill-mannered conduct. His conduct was nothing new. They knew he was a bad cop. He was a mean cop and he was an evil cop. And nobody crossed him. That's why those additional cops who stood by did nothing. They stood and did nothing because they didn't want to lose their job, their pension, and they didn't want to be held accountable for the man's death. But being a standby makes no difference. You're still accountable for the death. What he's implementing is that we need to cut to the core of the root. When you're trying to get rid of a weed in the ground, you just can't snap off the part of the plant. You got to dig that root up and pull it out of the ground and say you are no longer able to operate as a police officer. If we do that, we stop a lot of the bad roots infecting all of the good cops that are out there and good people who are dying from it. I'm gonna back it up just a little bit.
Stop to make sure that Chairman Graham is concerned that an officer who does something wrong doesn't lose his house, and to also meet all of our concern that the departments get behind the policies, the procedures, the training, the culture, and the discipline that will, to your point, Mr. Merritt, prevent these things from happening in the first place. So given those three choices, leave qualified immunity alone, strip out qualified immunity but don't touch indemnification, or strip out qualified indemnity and protect indemnification, make sure that officers remain indemnified, which would you recommend?
I would recommend, protecting or moving towards responding as superior. I'm sorry, which are three options. It's the third option that ensures the superior individual, the entity, does a quality check on their employees.
It's nothing new under the law. Responding superior has been around forever, and it's the status quo in these cases as a matter of practice, is it not?
That's correct.
So now they're saying remove all protections and leave it to those who are in authority to make the final judgment. I don't know if I agree with that either. BF1 in the chat room, somebody talk to me. I'm watching and listening, but what he's saying, look, what if we just pull all their immunities and their rights away and let their superior make that final decision? How do we know the superior ain't the evil white man in the department? He's not the ultimate evil. So he gives all of them immunity. Why are we going to give that latitude to one superior of power? I don't know if that's a good thing. I think there needs to be guidelines. There's guidelines for us. There need guidelines for them. If you're killed, an eye for an eye. That means that you could be killed. You could be prosecuted. You can't be just kind of manually or orally or written up, okay, we're going to get on this guy for his wrongdoings. We need to kind of enforce some more of a stricter law than some lightweight procedure. But then we're in the conversation stage. Put some comments, I'll pull back in.
Let's go to anything to add. I've gone over 30 seconds, so keep it short.
No, I agree.
Okay, thank you. I'll yield back the time I've gone over.
Okay, thank you. Senator Hawley, as you can tell, 5 minutes is subjective here. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to each of you for being here today. Pastor Logan, Professor Logan, if I could come back to you. I'm just a little bit familiar with, probably not as much as I should be, but with Epiphany Fellowship, both in Philly and in Camden, and with Eric Mason. I've had the great privilege of hearing preach many times, and with your ministry. So thank you for what you've done in those places, and thank you for your continuing ministry. Can I just ask you to come back to your experience in Camden? And I've read your testimony, and at the risk of having you repeat yourself, but I don't think that would hopefully do anybody any harm. As you talk about the restructuring that you helped participate in there at Camden, and police coming to your block, you say in small groups of 2 or 3. And yeah, I love your line. You said our problems in Camden were not going to be solved overnight. We needed the slow cooker version. I wondered if you could just elaborate on that a little bit more for us. You were doing it with Senator Lee, but could you just pick that back up and talk to us about what that looked like in Camden, what you saw be successful there, about building those relationships and what that meant?
Yes, I would say I always talk about crockpot ministry. It takes a long time to work it through. It's not simple, especially when we're trying to change culture. In the murder of George Floyd, he was training, an officer with 17 strikes was training other officers that day, which we would have trained officers with a bad culture, which would have then blended into the culture and added to the systemic issues already. And so if we're going to change something, we have to change culture. So the crockpot reality was listening and learning and then trying to legislate. The crockpot reality, the slow cooker, taking our time, was not going to be just throw money at it. It wasn't going to be just grab 20 African Americans and 20 Latinos and call that diversity. bootleg versions of patches, but it was going to take a collective overhaul and then a long build out. And I applaud all the government workers there in Camden who took their time and worked that through. And not only was it a comprehensive overhaul, but it was a collective overhaul because they called in people from all over the city to participate in that. And that took time. I mean, Camden, we saw multiple murders. I did multiple funerals of kids under 15 on that. And then on the other hand, felt very, very unsafe. And so all of us wanted to say, you got to fix this now. But it was a crock pot repair.
I want to stop right here. I want you to understand the reason why this gentleman's getting an opportunity to speak, because in Camden, they went ahead and they've implemented a structure of reform for police. Not like Seattle, Washington, where, peace, love, happy, smoke potting people are taking over a police department. Not the smoke pot, weed smoking people in Seattle. Shout out to y'all and how y'all handling your business. This man is trying to build a more sensible reform of policing. And they've done it and didn't. So this man is speaking to Congress saying, look, we've done it from a state and local level. This is how government works. Now we should use this system that we have and put it from this level to a federal level. That's why they're having this conversation. You guys understand? Put BF1 in the chat room. Thank you, Herb Saint. And Pam, thank you for your monitoring. And I appreciate Eagle Hair Braiding Incorporated. I like what you have to say as well. Lawrence is out there and Work Hard is out there. DM, thank you again for your donation. You guys come in. Kina, I thank you so much. Rainey, you always say good things in the chat room. It is good that we have these conversations with each other. So BF1 in the chat room, if you understand where I'm coming from. But they need to look at some kind of as a template, of an example of reform that's more logical and sensible than the weed smoking folks up in Seattle. Let's keep going.
As you look back on that experience, what are the pieces that stick out to you as being the most significant, that made the most impact, that really moved the ball forward the most?
I think it was the community policing where those conversations and those relationships were developed, where they were visible and active. So that community policing was a big deal. And second was hearing from the residents and from multiple groups, particularly the pastors and different ones. And Mayor Red did good to pull in as many as she could in her time. So that relational community aspect was really a beautiful element that helped greatly.
Very, very good. Can I ask about something else you said in your written testimony? You talk about the flaws of asking police to fix upstream problems, your words. Could you just talk to us a little bit about your experience as a pastor, what you mean by upstream problems, and just maybe tell us more what you mean about that, because I think that seems...
I want to stop right here. He called him as a pastor. This is a good pastor. Let me tell you that there's some good pastors, wannabe pastors, and they hang out with Trump pastors. This gentleman, you've not heard him being talked about too much. Well, first time I heard of him. Maybe somebody y'all know of him. But this is a man that's engaged in the community. And the problem with Black ministers today, we don't see enough ministers like this that are willing to put their church on the front line, to have conversations with the police, to talk about police reform, not let the police just use their property like my home church, Crenshaw Christian Center, does. They allow the police to use their property, but instead allow the police to sit down with activists in the community and talk about creating a sound structure. So if you're going to go back to the civil rights days of the ministers that used to converse with the activists, then you have to pull in police and say, look, we need to have a structured, sound idea, and that's what we're doing. So shout out to Durham for his donation, and all you guys continue to make your donation. Make sure you go to the Cash App, because that comes directly in my account. I can go get some gas today. So if you can do that, I appreciate it. But I want to make this clear that the conversations not only have to have in depth, but they have to be structured, and that we need to see some results. This pastor is saying we have results. Hear our hearts and let them be heard.
Seems like a significant point you're making there.
Well, it's been said here on this committee that a police officer is given a task of social worker on the second decision making. And yes, it's difficult. He's social worker, he's fixing, he's dealing, he's trying to administer mercy, he's trying to do so much. And I want to give credit to those officers who navigate that. But my colleague, Mr. Merritt, has told us that we failed miserably and we kill a lot of people in America through police, and other countries haven't. So when we if my plumbing backs up, I'm not going to call an electrician because he's probably going to mess up my plumbing. So when we put plumbing problems on electricians, they mess up your plumbing. And so when we put so much on police, and that's why the system is messed up, because they shouldn't have to do that. And so the upstream problem, it's difficult navigating and almost unfair. That's why we talk about the brokenness of the system.
Okay, last question, Mr. Chairman.
Now, he's a little emotional because this is hard. Before y'all start throwing stones at a brother if I'm about to cry, don't throw stones. This man knows the weight of the world's on his shoulders. The weight of the world is on this poor brother's shoulders right now, because this is Congress and the United States of America watching this. Imagine millions of people and then billions around the world watching this to address racism, systemic racism, and bias protection rights for police, rights given to police. He's got to explain that to you. But I need you to understand what the brother is saying. You know, these people don't live in our community. They don't understand our hearts. And I want you to understand we need to make a difference. Let's hear him one more time. So don't throw stones.
Hearing from the residents and from multiple groups, particularly the pastors and different ones, and Mayor Red did good to pull in as many as she could in her time. So that relational community aspect was really a beautiful element that helped greatly.
Very, very good. Can I ask about something else you said in your written testimony? You talk about the flaws of asking police to fix upstream problems. Your words. Could you just talk to us a little bit about your experience as a pastor, what you mean by upstream problems, and just maybe tell us more what you mean about that, because I think that seems like a significant point you're making there.
Well, it's been said here on this committee that a police officer is given a task of social worker on the second decision making, and yes, it's difficult. He's social worker. He's fixing. He's dealing. He's trying to administer mercy. He's trying to do so much. And I want to give credit to those officers who navigate that. But my colleague, Mr. Merritt, has told us that we failed miserably and we kill a lot of people in America through police, and other countries haven't. So when if my plumbing backs up, I'm not going to call an electrician because he's probably going to mess up my plumbing. So when we put plumbing problems on electricians, they mess up your plumbing. And so when we put so much on police, and that's why the system is messed up, because they shouldn't have to do that. And so the upstream problem it's difficult navigating and almost unfair. That's why we talk about the brokenness of the system.
Okay, last question, Mr. Chairman. Pastor, can you just give us an example? Give us an example what you think of an upstream problem, a plumbing problem that we're calling an electrician for, just to help us get our hands around it.
I'll use a negative. Mr. Brooks in Atlanta, the officer showed up to ask him to talk with him. I felt that they were applying not just justice, but mercy. He was saying I could just walk home. And so now they're navigating a few areas. Are they supposed to do justice and lock him up? Are they supposed to do mercy and honor and say, look, I'm asleep, I can go home? And so in light of that is so much to juggle and handle. Yeah, I'm a little emotional. I saw that video and it's been messing with my head, even sitting here. But yeah, I think we give too much to do for our officers and we don't train them properly. I think we need to parse this out and restructure completely, because we need comprehensive change and radical intervention.
Thanks. Senator, if I may add to that question.
We need comprehensive change and radical intervention. When I'm telling you that brother's on point, We're almost towards the end of this. Thank you guys for liking and chiming in. I got to pivot just a little bit. Bear with me. I'm coming back to this, but it came to mind. I want to show you something. I'm going to show you something. Okay. Remember, he's talking about police and I know you can see me typing something, so I'm deal with it. I'm going to show you this video where these police I had filmed downtown LA that harassed Black people. See, this is the mental illness. Like, why they were writing him a ticket. And I'm thinking, why are you writing this poor man a ticket? What's the purpose of writing this man a ticket? Doggone it. What's the purpose of writing this man a ticket? Let's see. If it's in this one, if it's not, I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna look on my phone and then bring it back to y'all. I think that taping might be, that's the bleaching. Hold on. Because I kept saying, so these cops were bothering these black people, homeless, right? Like they normally do, because they gotta meet their quota. And so they're not even talking about these damn quotas that they have to meet. That's all I wanna know. Why are you guys gotta meet these damn quotas for how you treat black people? I'm trying to find this one video. Hold on. Yes, this video, if you guys haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe, get the subscribe button up, get the likes button up. I've been in this game a long time. For those who might just be chiming in, my name is Shirley Husar. I'm the CEO of Urban Game Changers, where we go into urban communities and we hold elected officials accountable as well as ourselves. I have been out on these streets trying to expose a lot of ill wrongs done. A lot of videos I've done on Facebook and YouTube, so sometimes they don't cross-pollinate. Yeah, that video's on YouTube, on Facebook. So I'm gonna go on my Facebook and let you guys continue, and I'm gonna find that video, and then I'm gonna move it up to the front and come back to it. And the reason why is because I wanted you guys to know that what he is saying is so true. That the mentally ill people should not be governed by police. It should be governed by someone who has who understand the mentally ill, a doctor, a psychiatrist, or someone in that field. You should not have police brutality, which is another form of police brutality, for those who want to know why I use that word, to manage homeless people. Because to get to the point where you've lost everything and you are now the 80 to 90% of the homeless population of California is because they have mentally disabled you. And that has to do with the police, elected officials, immigration, and illegal immigration. So that's why he's emotionally a wreck right now. But let's keep going.
You bet. Absolutely.
What we're finding out is that no amount of law enforcement, no amount of use of force can secure a community that's stuck in poverty. To tell us we can't be the social workers, we can't be the mental and clinical health therapists, we can't be the housing counselors and all these other things we do. They're telling us what our community do, and they respect it on the ground. And so if we can find, as I alluded to earlier, again, $200 billion a year to public police prisons, we can never find the resources to raise the minimum wage, to clear the Section 8 waiting list, and to provide those social workers and all the other things that are actually telling us that we can do. Well, then those are some of the upstream problems that officers are constantly trying to tell us that we need to address. That's why we're putting social workers in their call to connect people to stability, to support solutions, instead of just creating deeper crisis when we find people who are in crisis.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think I'll lead off with that, and I appreciate Mr. Logan's words and his emotion, because I think we're all feeling that. Mayor Carter, it was hard to hear parts of your story, but just so my colleagues can hear it, you were talking about how your grandpa, Melvin Sr., worked at that railroad in Minnesota, and how he was called George. In fact, all the porters were called George, so that the white passengers only had to hear one name. And then out of that, and learn one name, your dad becomes one of the first African-American police officers in the city of St. Paul. And you talked about how you thought about your dad, and I know still do, and the people around him, the officers he knew as superheroes. And I guess my question is how you talk to those police officers now, some of whom you knew growing up, about why it is so important to have this systemic change with policing, from your personal experience.
Senator, thank you for that question. And I think that's really important to know. Our officers are just as disgusted by the video of George Floyd's murder. I had one officer recently say to me, and I signed up for an individual's job, but the notion that I can be hurt because someone's upset about something that some other officer did in some other jurisdiction, that makes me frustrated. And so we are connected with our officers, and they know that those instances don't serve them well. They don't want to serve next to those officers, and they're frustrated with and my children, all of our children deserve to be able to look at our officers as those superheroes in the way that I did. That's one of the reasons why it's so important, as you mentioned, We constantly integrate our officers into our community. The real work that we have established under Chief Axel, our police chief, we've significantly grown our community engagement division in our police department. We established those initiatives that I mentioned to ensure that we're providing pathways for youth who grow up in our city, go to our other schools to become officers and serve the city, both as officers, as medics, as teams, as firefighters. That is critical. They're out at our communities, as you are receiving. They're out at our communities. They're engaging with people on a direct basis, so that their only engagement with people isn't just there's something wrong and I'm here to arrest you. We talk about all the time about that. It's a part of our training. It's a part of our mission. Our chief always asks folks as we talk about that, as we go about the work. In the words of our chief, putting deposits into our bank of trust. What we don't have to do.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to ask Ms. Gupta a question, but I'll have you follow up on the record. I know Senator Graham was asking you about other police departments, or you were responding to his question about Minneapolis. And I think you were trying to make the point that this is happening all over the country and it's not just in one department. So I want to give you a chance on the record later to answer that. But I'm going to turn my remaining time to Ms. Gupta. And I think you know, Ms. Gupta, that I led a letter with about 26 senators asking for a pattern and practice investigation from Attorney General Barr of the Minneapolis Police Department. And do you think that such a pattern and practice investigation is needed?
Yes, I do.
And I don't know if you're aware, but right before this hearing started, and we've done 2 letters now, a group of us, I got a response, and it was from Mr. Boyd, the Assistant Attorney General, and they did not commit to doing this investigation. They said the section may initiate a civil action in the name of the United States and seek appropriate injustice. Wait a
minute, I got to respond to Rainey. Rainey, I said the same thing. Rainey's talking about that man. She says, is that a picture of him next to President Obama shaking hands? She goes, I don't trust him. I know, I kind of went blank too. I was like, And plus he's all muffled. You know, it's not my computer. That's how he came through because he was broadcasting. But every black person got to say something. They got to be fair on both sides. I like to show myself as bipartisan if I were him, knowing that hearings were there so that people can hear you. But after they Google your name, you can figure out where these people stand.
Injunctive relief. We will carefully consider the evidence in this case, as well as any additional information that comes to our attention. Do you think there is enough information now out there that the whole world has seen to embark on this investigation?
I think the years of systemic problems in the Minneapolis Police Department, coupled with, of course, George Floyd's the most recent killing of Mr. Floyd and other police misconduct in Minneapolis by the police department would merit a pattern and practice investigation. There's a pretty abundant amount of evidence.
And I also know that some of the consent decrees, when you led the Justice Department Civil Rights Division, we actually required police departments to ban the use of chokeholds and other neck restraints. Is that right?
That's right.
So that's one of the examples of something that could come out of a consent decree that was a result of a pattern and practice investigation.
Yes.
And then in our state now, because we have not been able to have that Justice Department pattern and practice investigation, in addition to Attorney General's investigation, Attorney General Ellison of the case and his prosecution of the case, we now have our Minnesota Department of Human Rights stepping in to look at the department. And Senator Harris was talking about the importance of having outside investigations, which I strongly supported when I was a prosecutor. We had some issues, as you may know, with the Minneapolis police trying to take those investigations in-house. But in addition to that, states, especially now, if the Justice Department isn't doing pattern and practice, could step in to actually oversee these investigations, but as well as oversee a similar version of a pattern and practice. Could you address that?
Yeah, I mean, I think both, just to get to your earlier point about chokeholds, consent decrees covered in many instances bans on chokeholds. They are not a substitute for national legislation on this issue, because otherwise it's just kind of jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and the Justice Department, even when functioning according to its mandate, can't meet all of that. So national legislation is required. And then on this other point, on state AGs and other independent offices being able to do these investigations, it's really important that there are prosecutors and state AGs offices that are empowered to be able to take these issues on. They are going to have more trust than local DA's offices. It's just the nature of this, given the close relationship between district attorneys' offices and police departments. And so while I want the Civil Rights Division at the U.S. Justice Department that is filled with expertise to be fully funded and resourced and be given the authority that it needs to have, it is also really important to be able to equip state attorneys general and independent offices to do this as well.
Thank you very much.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for.
Okay, I'm gonna stop right there. I'm not going to Senator Cruz. Make sure you guys follow that video. I found the video. I wanted to show you. I want to show you. So I'm gonna show you this video. I'm gonna show you this video that I did in 2017. Yeah, 2017. Well, time is flying, y'all. And I want to show you. Shout out to all y'all who did. Lawrence Jones made a Cash App donation. I can't throw my own. Oh my God! Come on, Shirley. Can't even just type my name in. You can type in Shirley Husar. Shirley Husar videos. Shirley Husar videos. Okay, this will come up. Shirley Husar videos. See all videos. See all videos. Who's this calling? Okay, whoever the private number is, I can't talk to. Okay, scroll down and then click on F Downtown Los Angeles. How many views do we see in this video? We see almost 1 million views. And this is not fake news because nobody was showing downtown and I had enough. So let me show you something. I want you to see how these police officers are harassing this black man. This is 2017. So we are downtown Los Angeles. And you just heard a video where a gentleman said that 97% of the people homeless downtown are African American people. We have police officers out here on horses. The homeless say that the police officers on the horses are the worst. I don't know why, but that's what the homeless say. They don't really. I've not seen an African American officer on a horse. I've just only seen white officers. And, so it's our job to make sure that we get these videos to Mr. Trump and let them know what's going on in the state of California, that the local police will not be working with the ICE police and will not be complying to federal law. Many cities have said they're sanctuary cities, and certain even sheriff departments said they will not be complying to federal law. So therefore, it will be only a time before U.S. Marshal comes and there will be Armageddon in California. Now, you hear me narrating? I was saying that live while the police officers were writing this man a ticket. And the reason I was saying it live in that manner, so they knew, number one, ain't no average Negro filming this damn video, number one. Number two, the brother does have some rights. So I'm going to speak some rights. Number three, I wanted them to know I was live broadcasting their ass. Now, the reason why they're on horses is because they can see who they want to point out. And this man fits their profile. He's tall, he's dark, and he's a male. And they're writing him some type of bullshit ticket because when I saw them approach him, the man was doing nothing. But they like to harass these black people because they have to meet their quota. And the quota discussions were never addressed in these hearings. Police brutality and police reform and the police being able to have their CYA was discussed, right? We talked about them being able to cover their own ass and to get a check even if they kill somebody. But nobody talked about the quota of tax dollars that are received, or human tax dollars, meaning that this man gets so many tickets, he's gonna go to jail and he will be used as a human slave. Come on now, put the thumbs up button and get the BF1s out there. Get the BF1s. Y'all know what I'm talking about. They're going to use this man for privatized prisons, but we've got to build cases up. And we like them tall Negroes because they're easy to be remembered and spotted out. But when you hear me speaking in this video, this is not dubbed over. This is an actual live recording of what I said while they were doing their job. And most of the officers that are in California, they don't hire black people. They usually hire Mexicans or Latinos who are little bitty people who really don't have the body type to be a cop. And So we're just here, just making sure that people are able to see what's going on. This gentleman's getting a ticket for some reason. We're out across the street, and he wasn't bothering anybody, but apparently, I guess he did something. So they're trying to do their job. So far, they've not harassed him in the wrong manner. But as you can see, people are homeless trying to keep their space clean. They're good people. This is a good man here trying to do good for the city, because the city doesn't even want to come and maintain the streets. The tax dollars don't even. I want to say to myself, Shirley, tax dollars. I couldn't say tax. I don't know why I didn't say tax, but there's a lot going on when I'm filming these videos live, because I got a CYA, because first of all, I'm the cameraman, the editor, the producer, and I'm the cover my own ass walking by myself in this. This is why my children won't let me go back down there, because they're like, you can't go back down there by yourself. So, and I've asked some of y'all, I said, hey, if you want to come with me, let me know. But right now with COVID going on, Rona and I don't get along too good. So I'm going to leave Rona alone, and we just going to revert to some of these past videos. But to let you know, this ain't changed much. This ain't impressing me much, because these police ain't trying to help black people. They ain't trying to help black people then, and they ain't trying to do it now. So I say tax dollars when I meant tax dollars. Clean the streets here. The people want to clean the streets. And you can't give that one away. But the city, there's a genocide movement going on where they are going after African American people. They're harassing African American people. There's 500 black girls missing in this country. So there is a genocide process. And I just want you guys to see it throughout the United States, what California and how they treat their own. Black people are the infrastructure and the fiber of this country. And we will make sure these videos do get to Mr. Trump. As a delegate for Mr. Trump, it is my job to make sure that this city is able to see what the real deal is in these urban communities. As you can see, this man's dog is barking. He's probably used to seeing them harass police officers. So that's why the dog is barking. As you can see, this dog is really, really upset. Man, just wanted to pet the dog. Anyway, I want you guys to see this is Black America. This is how they care about blacks in California. The black people don't have much. There are white people down here homeless as well. You rarely see any Mexicans homeless, because the Mexicans come together and they help their people. Our people need help. We need resources. We need housing. Many of these people have Section 8 vouchers, but they can't even use the voucher because their homes are being used by immigrants, and illegal immigrants are being given vouchers over black people. But I just wanted you to see what the lifestyle of black homeless people live like in California. Many times we talk about it, but some of you guys aren't bold enough to walk down here and just meet these gentlemen. These are good people who just are trying to get ahead in life. So I'm going to end it right there. Make sure you guys follow that video. That video is called F Downtown Los Angeles. And it's where I show you some of the homeless people that are going on in Los Angeles. That's an old video. Unfortunately, we live in a society. That's an old video. So I wanted you to see that. Make sure you look at these are all my videos. Just go to Facebook, and you can see these videos. Is there another one I was going to bring up to my attention? No, I just want you to see that particular one so that you understand what's going on. Let me stop now. Hey, I am back. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'm not going to actually have a group chat. I just wanted to give a narration. Let's see what the Senate does. Let's see what the Senate is going to act upon. Because I think the more of us are able to have a voice on the table, we are gangsters heavy California. Oh yeah, the gang members and the gangster life is real. It's real. If you don't think it's real, go to streetgangs.com. She keeps a good update on that. Go to that website, streetgangs.com. And I want to thank her, but I want to thank you guys all for just hanging in. And the donations that were made by DM. And again, I'm so grateful for so many of you guys. And Lawrence, who made a nice private donation. on Cash App. If y'all can make a donation through Cash App, it allows me to get some gas and, you know, be able to go to Church's Chicken, and I need some Church's Chicken. I'm kidding, but it does bless me in so many ways. So thank you so much. We've got bills to pay, and it also helps with the internet. Mostly that's internet bill, and I appreciate that. I didn't give a shout out to this beautiful sister and what is about to be resources of guns. You know, look, African American people need to equip themselves. Y'all need to get you some guns. You need to get you some guns. And the reason why I tell you why you need to have your own guns is because what I've learned is that these people are out here and they're able to equip themselves, and we can't. We're not using wisdom. We're not using wisdom. You know, in California, I'm telling you, they would tell people, give up your guns and you get a Walmart card. Now, what good was that? What good is that? That doesn't help any of us. You know, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's like Atlanta, California, New York, New Jersey, Mississippi. Pick a state. Just pick a state. I mean, they're all terrible on what they're doing, on all what they're doing. DM, I put my Cash App in the chat room. Please make sure that if you don't see it, keep looking down. It's this one right here. So if you guys want to make a donation, you can make a donation. That's the Cash App, because I know DM had asked, Durham had asked where was the donation, and that's the Cash App. This is important. It's important that we realize that Black family comes first. Black family comes up. Please hit the thumbs up button and share this video, because the more videos that you share, the more you like, the more I'll do more of. This was just a breakdown of a dissertation of the conversation that's going to come about in the upcoming days with the Senate. We will do a late night review if I'm up tonight. We'll do a quick review of what we watched today, and then we'll bring in some more of our special guests. But for today and for now, I just wanted to thank you so much for watching. What we learned from this discussion is that America is watching, the streets are talking, and legislators are going to have to pay attention. Now, the question is, after they've paid attention and acknowledged there's some wrongdoing, which is taking too long, but it's part of the judicial process, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Where's the results and where's the execution? Because we always talk about results. I want to see execution now. We want to talk about solutions. We can't have solutions with no execution to get those solutions, and what happens after the knowledge of the education that was given, and then we put laws or we put pieces of proposals to the table. And we can't just put legislation that talks about an epistemic study. We don't need any more studies. We need laws. We need things put in place to stop police brutality, to stop police being able to be insured, that was discussed, to stop protection for their families and not ours, that was discussed, to talk about how they're not living in our neighborhoods and they're coming in and they're working in our neighborhoods, that was discussed. These are things that we need to bring to the forefront. And so for what I can see in that time frame of discussion with the Senate, it's a good thing. Now we want to see, is there an outcome? Please, in the chat room, you guys can put BF1, PF1, BF1, make a BF1, and everyone needs to be accountable. I agree with that. Linda, I had to put you on timeout because you were pivoting away from the subject matter. I don't know who you are, but just so that you know, in our group chats, we stay on top of being informed and discussing our issues, not your personal issues. I'm sorry about your loss, but we stay informed and on top of our personal issues. If we find out that we are pivoting away from the issues of the subject matter, I will have you leave the room or I'll just block you. But thank you so much for being in the chat room as well. Thank you guys for sharing and liking, and I look forward to doing more videos with you in the future. And make sure that you subscribe. God bless you and good evening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.